What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future-free state of Greater Idaho. I am the one-armed madman. And back with me, we've got from the Liberty Lighthouse, the great Peter Serifen. Peter, I had to call in the big guns for this episode. I set up all of this commie interview. You know, I'm watching this commie interview and I'm going, oh my God, this is insane. I can't believe this is actually happening right now. And I was going to bring it to my buddy Nolan, and I said, you know what? We're going to call in the big guns. We're going to call in the Liberty Lighthouse and find out what's really going on here.
Well, the email that you sent, that reaching out and asking me to come on this one, you know, it started with a big heaping pile of flattery. So that helped. You're like, oh, you know, I needed somebody that knew the Constitution, and you're the first person I thought of.
No, that's actually true. That's actually true. I don't really know anybody that knows a ton about the Constitution. Like, I'm a libertarian. A lot of my buddies are libertarians. And we haven't, like, I've got right here, you know, because we're going to get into it a little bit later. I've got my copy of the Federalist Papers here. And as you can see, it's nice and clean and unopened, which is not good.
Well,
So,
my copy, it's up there, you know, out of camera view. It's a big fat leather bound copy, and it is well worn.
I can imagine so. There's certain people that I listen to and I just go, this guy reads a lot of books. You know, like when I listen to RFK, I'm like, that guy does not watch TV. Dude is reading books every night when he gets home. And you've got that same feel for me. Like
I got to be honest though, a lot of my reading happens in audiobook format.
Oh, me too. I go all audiobook. I love it. I'm a big sci-fi guy, so I listen to sci-fi every night before I go to bed. I should probably.
Yeah, I listen almost exclusively to nonfiction, but you know, I'm a mailman in my regular day job, so I'm driving around alone for 4 or 5 hours a day. Hey, I can get through quite a bit of reading that way.
Oh, absolutely, it's awesome, man. So let's just jump right into this since we're going commie this episode. So, oh yeah, I forgot. I wore my LeBron James as a commie shirt.
I've never seen that before. That's funny.
Yeah, I don't remember what it says on the bottom, but it's like Comrade something. I don't know. It's fucking pretty good. Barstool Sports did this. I thought it was great. I had to buy it. All right, so let's hear a little bit about the new Communist Party of America.
Mm.
Can't hear it?
Not at all.
Okay, well, let me just play this. There's not any audio in this one anyway, or any words in this one. And after this, hopefully it'll work again like our guest did. This is weird, like, mix between, like, the Pledge of Allegiance type of music and Russian communism, which is just such a weird mix. All right. I think we get it. It's coast to coast communism. We're bringing communism. I know you watched that video. Did anything from that stick out to you?
Yeah, the fact that it seemed like same turds repolished.
Right? And I think that's kind of the point, really. There's not like all that much new that you can introduce. Like, oh, we just got to try it a different way. Like, it's been tried a lot of ways at this point, and you know that sausage ends up disgusting no matter how you pack it, right?
Right. But one of the, as I, you know, you sent it to me, I watched it, and thanks for sending it, by the way. I hadn't seen it yet. He said things, and I'm sure we'll get to them.
Yeah.
He said things in there that I'm like, well, that's not communism. Like, the Communist Manifesto says X, and you're saying Y. So that's not communism.
And I think that's kind of the point also, right? Like there's, you know what, let's just start with this because I've got so many, like we can go so many directions on this and it'll come up during this. So let me know if you can't hear this. I hope you can. Otherwise we're screwed.
Well, if there was an ad for capitalism, it would just be ugliness, despair, and misery. I think that there's nothing beautiful about capitalism. But when you look at communism, you look at places like China, which is very culturally different than the United States, we see nothing but economic success. And in America, communism is going to be its own thing. Of course, we're going to have our own American history, American characteristics that we must address. But ultimately, it's about the rapid industrialization of our economy at a time when the entire establishment is pushing a degrowth agenda and a pro war agenda. We're going to be focused on doing that at the same time as prioritizing the needs of the American public, which means ending all the endless wars. And most people probably think about communism in the West and they think about liberals and blue haired college students and woke identity politics. But historically, that couldn't be more off the mark. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of big moneyed interests like Wall Street who have propagandized the American public into thinking that's what communism is. And lastly, the FBI was literally created in America to attack communists. So now you see the FBI attack the largest anti war, anti imperialist voices in the world. But initially, it was built to actually attack communists. So we're here to set the record straight and provide a patriotic message for the American people that's actually about saving our country and freeing America from the control of these corporate corrupt entities.
So
Oh, so like any good communist, you have to start off by trashing capitalism, right?
Right. So let's start with setting the record straight. Capitalism has brought more people out of poverty than all other forms of government combined in the history of the world. And communism has killed more people than anybody else. Communism can easily be traced to killing, the mass extinction of 94 million people in the last 100 years. He talked about the rapid expansion of the Chinese economy. Okay, sure. Big expansion of the Chinese economy. How did that happen? Well, the Chinese, the People's Republic of China, the Communist Party of China, pumps money that they don't really have into doing just random stuff like building ghost towns. They, build an entire city, but nobody's living there. So they employ a bunch of people to do something that's worthless. And which, oh, by the way, is crashing the real estate market in China right now.
Yep.
So he started out with all this nonsense right off the bat. And he talked about, the Western view of communism, the blue-haired lady. Well, no, that's the view of the progressive nut job. That's not communism. That's just craziness. Communism is very clearly defined in the Communist Manifesto. There's 10 steps to communism. And oh, look, we in America have already adopted 8 of the 10, and we're working on another 2. So he starts off on a bad premise, saying, capitalism is ugly. Well, you know what? Life is ugly. And life under capitalism, under communism, under socialism, life is always going to be ugly. There are always going to be poor people. You can't legislate away poverty. It just can't be done.
When I think about communism, I don't think about blue hairs in colleges. I think about death and destruction.
Yeah.
Period. And you're completely right about like this economics. That was my first thought, was the ghost cities. Okay, well, we're building ghost cities, and Ludwig von Mises had a great, take on this exact phenomenon, which was essentially the boom and bust cycles. Imagine giving a master builder all the materials to build the building that he's supposed to build, but then once the building's 90% done, he realizes that he was given not enough materials. So now not only is that building worthless, but everything you've done in the process of building that building was for nothing. So it's literally just a house of cards waiting to blow over. And we're doing the exact same. I mean, they learned central banking from us. It's not like they went to Russia and said, how did they central bank? It's like, no, how is America doing it? Because they're been able to do it for a lot longer. Ugh.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I do want to give the guy credit for one thing, though. The anti-war
Yes.
part of his opening is great. I'm all for the let's get out of these endless foreign wars that have nothing or very little to do with us. So I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah, that has to happen. And I'm not as familiar with communism as you. I don't know if anti-war is completely baked into the philosophy. I know that certain commies have that type of philosophy, but for the most part, communist states have not been, peaceful beacons of liberty. Like, these places have been at war with themselves or their neighbors from the inception of the state to its eventual collapse.
Right. And I think it's funny, he wants to talk about, peace and prosperity. Okay. You mean like Stalin, when he told the farmers to plant crops in the winter because they didn't have enough food? How'd that work out?
Yeah.
Millions died.
Take a walk around Africa right now. The only reason they are not still living in huts and burning poop is from free market capitalism and access to cheap fossil fuels.
Yeah.
One thing that a communist state is not going to want you to have is access to cheap fossil fuels, because that's going to enable the individual to be an entrepreneur and outshine the government, which can't happen.
Right. Before we move on,
Mhm.
you said you don't know a whole lot about communism. I've got pulled up on my screen over here the 10 steps in the communism.
Perfect. I'd love to hear that.
So let's go through these real quick. Number one, abolish the property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. So no more private property.
Mhm.
You can't own land. The government owns it all.
Yep.
Number two, a heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax. Gee, that sounds familiar. Tax the rich.
Yeah, no
make
shit,
them pay
right?
their fair share.
We're finally going to make them pay their fair share. Finally.
Yeah, right. Number three, abolish the right of inheritance. Wow.
Yeah.
So you're going to
I've heard
work
that one.
all your life, you're going to get whatever, and then you can't pass it on to your kids. It just goes to the government.
Which we are also doing here in America.
Yeah.
They want to tax us on our inheritance now.
Yeah, we don't abolish it yet. We just tax it away.
Yeah, I met with a money guy at one point, and I asked him about that, and he goes, "Well, you might not like this take, but the government has to make money somehow." And I'm like, "You're not my money guy."
No, not
Sorry.
No. You want here's a little don't tell anybody kind of secret. You want to pass something on to anybody else when you die? Have it in your house in gold and cash and silver and something that they can just walk away with and don't have to report.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Can neglect to report.
Yeah, and have yourself buried on that property, because there are, in certain states, there are some tax benefits to being buried on your own land.
Yeah. Let's see. Number four, confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels.
Wow, I did not know that one.
So you want to stand up against your government? Well, then we'll just take away everything you have. Number five, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly.
Wow, that doesn't sound familiar.
No, it doesn't sound anything like student loans now, does it?
No. Oh my God.
Number six, the centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state.
Oh my God. No car for you.
Yeah, no car for you, unless we get a kill switch.
Yeah, drive the Tesla. You can drive it
Right,
when we tell you.
Number seven, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. The bringing into cultivation. Wow, I always have a hard time saying that word for some reason. Cultivation. The bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan.
So my neighbor ran cattle across the street for 30 years, and then inflation killed him. Actually, he died. And now I would imagine that the government could call that wasteland.
Right, probably. Number eight, equal liability of all to labor. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. Now, you have to remember, this was written in like 1840.
Yeah.
And agriculture was like the biggest industry in the world at the time.
And they starved everyone.
Right. So yeah, how did that work out
Yeah.
again for Stalin
They starved
or
everyone.
Mao? Um, Number 9, the combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, the gradual adoption, the gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country.
Oh
So
man.
spread everybody out, get rid of municipal governments, and make it all one big giant state.
And you know what? The agriculture thing just jogged in my memory. In that that trailer that we played, one of the
Mhm.
main scenes was a combine
Yeah,
with the skull or with the sickle and sigh on it. So that makes a
yeah.
lot of sense. I bet you they would love to deindustrialize our country and make us all farm workers again.
And actually, that would be good for us.
It
But
it, it wouldn't be bad, but
it would be good for us on
it would be
we're
at
all
the barrel of a gun, you
right.
know.
No, that part's bad.
Yeah.
And number 10, free education for all children in public
Of
schools.
course. Of course.
Ab-
How could we
Abolition
how
of
could we not
child
have
labor in its present form, not necessarily abolishing
that?
child labor, just
Oh.
the form that it existed in the 1840s, and the combination of education with industrial production.
Ooh. Ooh,
All right,
that's
so
a
those are the
that's a
10
lot of
steps.
word salad in there too. Like there's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of, oh man, that's wild. And I'm somebody actually that would be amenable to like some child labor laws being rolled back. Like I remember I had a horrible time getting a job when I was in high school because they wanted a work permit and then you had to
Right.
have the license. It's like, come on, guys, I'm 15. Like, just let me go to work. I've been
Yeah.
working for a contractor for 5 years. Like, just let me get an actual job now. So
Yeah, I broke all kinds of labor laws
yeah.
when I was in high school
Oh, and I
employee.
worked in restaurants for 10 years, so labor
Yeah, me
laws
too.
don't exist in kitchens.
That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like, I can't make you stay, but can you stay?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So I know a little bit more about communism than I guess like I haven't read a ton about communism. I know these like how the basic thing goes, but like I can't quote you Marx or anything like that. So it was interesting hearing those because I've never actually like read those before. They all like check out,
Oh, yeah.
immediately. So
So
that's
that's the
interesting.
10 steps of the Communist Manifesto. And it's really fun if you stop and you think and you actually do a little bit of research and you compare those 10 steps to what's happened in our own government in this country since, I don't know, 1913.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
See a
let's
lot of
continue with
similarities.
these guys.
I always thought communism was the opposite of well, so how does the economy work inside of communism? Capitalism is someone puts up some capital, they start a company, they hire some workers, they produce a product, and then they sell it. What is the difference between that and what you're doing?
Well, I think capitalism, the way it operates in practice, is different than what is actually theorized. People always say, well, communism in practice is very different than how it's theorized. I think actually capitalism is the thing that's different. I mean, if you look at all of the, Abrahamic religions, if you look at Christianity, if you look at Islam, they talk about how, high interest loans, debt, these sorts of things, governing people by debt, these are all sinful acts. And that actually debt cancellation is something that should be celebrated. And under capitalism in the United States, that's just how our economy operates. That is the backbone of the US economy. It's Wall Street and these major transnational corporations who are siphoning money out of the working class by buying up all of the resources, stealing our land, stealing our oil, our natural gas, and also bankrupting the American people through means of debt and rapacious for-profit systems. The way that a communist country operates, at least when it comes to the economic aspect, is much similar to how we are witnessing China operate today. Of course, allow for small businesses to have healthy development, but when it comes to the major industries, when it comes to the basic rights of the people and the basic necessities of the people, those are things that should not be used to try and price gouge the public. Those should be operated by the state and ultimately a state that is dedicated to protecting the needs of the people. And if they don't, they'll be voted out of power. In America, it makes no sense to me why Bill Gates is allowed to buy up all of the land in the country or a great portion of it. Makes no sense why BlackRock is allowed to buy up all the land. But the idea of doing what the Soviet Union did or what China did, land reform, is somehow considered extreme. Ultimately, I think this is why we've had such an overwhelming positive response online. I mean, the American Communist Party has been trending now on Twitter for the past 4 days. And on Chinese social media, the people are very happy with what we're doing there as well.
That's just what we need, Peter. A state dedicated to the will of the people.
Oh, there's so much in that. Okay,
It's-
first off, he's if they're not doing what they're supposed to, vote them out.
We just got to
'cause
get the good people in there again, Peter. That's
Yeah,
all. We got to
because-
vote the good people in.
If we can't do that in a free capitalist society, how in the heck do you think that's going to work in a communist society? Do you honestly think that Putin has won, what's it, 8 elections in a row or something like that with like 95% majorities the whole time? Well, if he did, it's because everybody knows if they vote for somebody else, they're going to end up being suicided.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, buddy, here's your kids laying in bed at night. What do you think about that? These people don't mess around. These are gangsters. That's I view government as like essentially organized gangs, and
Right.
some of them are better than others. And
Michael Franzese. If you haven't met him yet or haven't talked to him yet, Michael Franzese. He was a mob guy.
I've heard him.
I had him on my show back.
Oh,
I don't
really?
even have it anymore. I had him on my show a while back. He wrote a book, and it basically he's comparing the way our current government operates to the way the mob operated when he was involved. And he says the it's a racket. He says the federal government works like our mob rackets did, and he gives specific examples of every. It was brilliant. I loved it.
I saw an interview with him where somebody asked him, like, how would you guys have handled COVID if, like, you were still in charge when COVID hit? He goes, oh, COVID would not have existed if we were in charge. We would have sent somebody to the governor's office and the mayor's office and said, hey, look, we're going to give you a week, and then we're going to come at you in a different way.
Uh-huh.
And that's it. And he said, if New York doesn't do it, the rest of the country doesn't do it either.
Yeah. We're going to give you a week, and then you're going to wake up with your prize thoroughbred's head in your bed.
Yep. And I do agree with something he said in this section. He said that capitalism is the one that's misrepresented, and that's absolutely true, because it's the government aspect of capitalism that really screws everything up. We don't live in a pure capitalist system. We live in a mixed system at best. I would say it's leaning closer to the socialist side than the laissez-faire side.
Absolutely. I mean, just the idea of wealth distribution, which is the purpose of a progressive income tax, is the definition of communism.
Yeah.
And yet we somehow in this country have just accepted that as normal.
Yeah. Social Security was never supposed to be a permanent program. No. But as they say, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program.
Right. Dwight Eisenhower, who was president when NATO was formed, said if this organization still exists in 10 years, it will have been a failure.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the time, it was like established for somebody like me. Say someone like me gets destroyed at work. I don't have any family. No one's there to protect me. We'll throw this guy a bone for a couple years until he can get back on his. That was kind of like the idea behind it. But, once these guys get their hooks in on something, it's never going anywhere.
Right. So other things that this guy just said, he said about, the rights of the people, and he keeps praising China. Okay, let's talk about the rights of the Chinese. What if you're Muslim and you're in China? Well, then you would be known as a Uyghur, and you would be in a concentration camp. You would be used for slave labor. Your wife will be raped by the Han Chinese, the ruling class of Chinese people.
They'll steal your organs.
In order to produce Han children, or you'll be, organ harvested while you're still alive.
Yeah, so some rich sheik in the Middle East wants your kidneys. Sorry, dude.
And if you're out there and you think all of that is just conspiracy theory, okay, what about just the basic sweatshops?
Mm-hmm.
The rights of the people. Oh, you mean like the sweatshops where they make your iPhone? where the people who tried to get out of the sweatshops get like captured and brought back like prisoners.
How many,
It's just funny.
how many people do you think own a gun in China? Private
None.
citizens?
None.
None.
Absolutely right.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And that's why they can get away with it. Two
I'm for
things that none
Medicare
of
for
these
all.
Yeah. Sorry.
two things that none of these commies ever want to acknowledge. One, capitalism will always exist, regardless of the form of government. There
Absolutely.
will always be a black market. There will always be somebody willing to do something for some benefit. It is human nature. You wanted a pair of Levi's during the USSR days, well, you were willing to pay through the nose for it, but you got them. And the other thing is, the idea of communism requires an immense blind trust in government. And I don't know if you know this or not, but my last book is called Trust Shattered. And it is, I don't know, 45 examples of why nobody should ever trust a government ever.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I have this new neighbor, and I just moved a new guy into one of my rooms in my house, and he goes over and talks to my neighbor, and he goes, "Hey, man, does your neighbor kind of give you weird vibes?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, everything about him kind of gives me weird vibes." I mean, what do you think? What's up with him? He goes, "Well, we were just kind of talking," and he goes, "Things are getting crazy. We'll just have to see what happens in November." So my guy goes, "Well, what do you want to happen?" He goes, "Well, I'll tell you one thing. I fucking hate Trump." And it's just like, okay, we get it. We know. And my guy, he made a great point. And he's a young kid, so he doesn't really get all this stuff very well. He goes, "There's just something weird to me about people who are excited to conform."
Yeah, definitely.
And that's exactly what you were talking about. This guy is just excited to conform. "Oh, have you checked out? The city has a website for its mosquito abatement, and you can go on there and request they come to our neighborhood. Oh my God, it's amazing." And it's like, that's a celebratory thing, right? Like, they're not actually reading your emails. They're doing their schedule. They have that email address so they can say that they read them. Like, this is common sense, man. Like, think about it in terms of capitalism. Like, you're running a business. You're not just going to start jumping into random places because you got an email. Like, you have a schedule that you have to keep. That's how you make money.
Right.
All right, let's continue with these guys.
For getting a capitalist out from in between me and my doctor, right? And so people have the wrong idea about Medicare for all. They think that the government will
I
then
have it right.
dictate healthcare policies. No, I'll still have a private doctor. I'll still have a private hospital. Just the government will send the check instead of Blue Cross not sending the check and making me bankrupt. So
Hold on, stop right there.
Okay,
that's the
got it,
only
got
difference
it.
that I have, right?
So now you want to get the government out between you and your doctor, but you expect the government to pay the bill. But who? So if the government is the one paying all of the bills, well, then they get to decide what bills they will or won't pay. I'm a disabled vet. I get free health care through the VA. It is the most socialist thing about my existence, is the fact that I take advantage of the VA.
Mhm.
If you want an example of what government-run healthcare will look like in this country, use the VA. You're going to have long wait times, and you're only going to get treatments that the government has approved 20, 30 years after they became normal mainstream.
Mhm.
So I'm a disabled vet because I've had multiple surgeries on one leg. And because of those multiple surgeries on that one leg, for years, I stood with all of my weight on the other leg. So I got horrible varicose veins in that leg.
Mhm.
I'm like, well, this is related to my disability. Fix it. The VA, this wasn't terribly long, 10 years ago, we'll say, maybe 15. The VA had one approved treatment for varicose veins, and that was what's called vein stripping, where they just yank them out of your leg.
Oh,
But in the private sector, there's sclerotherapy, there's laser therapy, there's lots of other options. But I couldn't get those going through the VA. That is Medicare for all.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm an anarchist and I have to rely on workers' comp for my livelihood. A lot of, like that's where my medical for my hand comes out of. So like I wanted a fancy prosthetic hand like any amputee should get in this country at this time, especially if you're, on a government salary essentially. And they did everything in their power not to get me a hand. They ended up screwing themselves because I was such like a work case that they were so lazy that they didn't want to actually manage my case. So they brought in a third party to manage my case. And they were the ones that finally said, you got to give him the hand. Like the Mayo Clinic saying, give him the hand. This hospital saying, you have to give him the hand. There's nothing you guys can do anymore. It took a year. And I was the first guy in North Dakota workers' comp history to get a prosthetic hand. And imagine how many people have blown their hands off in that state since we started pumping oil 10 years ago. A lot. There's a lot of them. And for me, I just got lucky that I'm a pain in the ass. Otherwise, I'd have been completely screwed. It's ridiculous. Like how many of these people have relatives in like Europe who fly over to their house to get an operation done on their knee? It's like, oh, I tore my ACL in the Alps skiing last winter, and they want to make me wait 8 months before I can get a surgery. It's like, no, you got to go. All right.
Again, it's that blind trust that the government is going to always do what's right. And
it's not just blind trust. It's like that guy where they're excited.
Yeah. I'm
excited to be an American. I'm excited to comply to these monsters. Look at her. She's great. Kamala, she was never an idiot for 3 years. Like all of my scam emails went from Biden to Kamala like that.
Instantaneously,
right? Like nothing happened. All right, let's finish this. Otherwise, we're never going to get through these.
So there's there's healthcare, there's energy, and when you say that big tech companies, you mean like Silicon Valley, right? Like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, these places that we want to be considered, that people like me want to be considered a town square, right? Meaning an essential service and a town square, so it should be nationalized, meaning that the government would run it. Is that what you're saying?
The government would own it, which means that you wouldn't have, basically the way it operates right now is the government does not own these companies, despite the fact that they're extremely embedded, and there's a revolving door between the government and the private sector in big tech. And the government can secretly recommend that certain people should be silenced or banned from social media, for example. And there's nothing illegal about that. That's not a First Amendment violation because they're just recommending, and this is not the final decision of the U.S. government. The government owned these sorts of things, then there would be no censorship online because if there ever was, it would be challenged as a First Amendment dispute. I think big picture, you can look at what's going on right now. Look at countries like China or countries like Russia. I mean, Russia's taking the land, the resources, the relationships of the Soviet Union and basically rebuilding this new multipolar world, even though Putin doesn't call himself a communist, basically is taking up the mantle and waving the flag at this point. You look at their relationships with Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea, China, of course. America today doesn't produce anything. America produces, stock buybacks. America produces a lot of wealthy individuals who are making money off of debt of hardworking Americans. America produces OnlyFans models and maybe Uber Eats drivers, and that's about it. China, Russia, Vietnam, North Korea, these countries are actually producing real tangible goods, lumber, coal, natural gas, oil. They're producing things. They're building new sovereign markets. In America, we just outsource everything that we used to produce, and now we're left with nothing. So the idea is that we actually bring back those jobs and focus on unleashing the forces of production to rapidly industrialize our economy once more.
Yeah, we're just going to build a bunch of factories and force people to work in them.
Right. Well, right now the government can, is like backdooring their way into the social media companies and censoring you, and it's not illegal. Well, yeah, it is. There's a long history of the Supreme Court cases saying if the Constitution prohibits the government from doing something, they can't go to a third party and have them do it. That's completely illegal. It's well adjudicated. It's there already. Number two, let's see. The government's going through a back door to censor you. Let's just give them control. That way they won't censor
Yeah,
you.
they won't use it. We're just going to control this thing. We have a narrative that we want pushed no matter what, but we're not going to force these people to push the narrative. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Like, I don't know if this guy's a moron or if he's just dishonest. I think he's dishonest because no person who's been paying attention for the last couple of years could honestly fucking believe that. That is just ridiculous. And for Jimmy to sit there, like, I like Jimmy. Jimmy's like a great voice for liberty a lot of the time. It's like the problem is Jimmy doesn't know anything about capitalism. He doesn't know anything about communism. He doesn't know anything about Bitcoin. He doesn't know anything about the Constitution. All he's really good at is complaining on the internet, and he's very good at it. And he's very good at like identifying the problems. The problem with his solutions are it's always more government. Hey, our healthcare system is destroyed by the government, so let's bring the government in to fix it. You know, like free speech in colleges are destroyed, so let's bring the government in to fix social media. Bring the government in to fix it. It's amazing to me how these people can identify all of these problems caused by government and just say, well, we just need to get more of it. It's so ridiculous.
Well, what he said about we don't produce anything in this country anymore.
It's not true.
It's not entirely true, but you know, we have outsourced a lot of jobs to other countries. Why have we done that? Mostly because of government regulations.
Yeah.
Government regulations that have made the cost of doing business in this country so high that it is cheaper to outsource it. Your iPhone, it is cheaper to have your iPhone manufactured in China and shipped across the Pacific Ocean to us than it is to have it manufactured here. It is cheaper. I saw this the other day at the store. I thought it was hilarious. It was a little fruit cup. I think it was pears. Fruit doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It was like the fruit came from Argentina. It was packaged in Thailand and then sold in the United States.
Unbelievable.
And somehow that whole process was cheaper than buying pears and packaging them in the US for sale in the US. Gee, how does that happen? That happens because of ridiculous amounts of government regulations and administrative law and that nonsense.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Try to build a nuclear power plant in this country today.
You can't.
You can't do it. Elon Musk should be powering his gigafactory with his own nuclear power plants.
Sure.
I'm all for something like that. Like, it's unbelievable that we've had nuclear power for, 75 years? And we're still not using it. All right, let's finish this guy.
I'm still not clear on how it works. So you would still have like Elon Musk. So let's say you became the ruling party in America. You guys got power. You got the majority in Congress, and you were the president. How would that affect, say, a business like Elon Musk? Or let's say ExxonMobil, or say a trucking company? How would you wouldn't take so the government wouldn't seize control of those companies, would they?
I think that America would be much better off if all of our major oil companies were in the hands of the state. I think America would be much better off if big tech was in the hands of the state. That way, there would be no loophole around censoring people online because they'd actually have to uphold our freedom of speech. You look at Russia today, the reason why they have such a low tax rate, despite not being communist, they have a 13% across the board tax rate. That's primarily due to the fact that they have such high oil and gas revenues, and they're able to actually lower taxes because their government is the one reaping profits and doesn't have to tax their people as much. In America, you have Chevron, you have Shell, you have BP, all these major companies in the West. that are taking that money and stealing it essentially from the public. It's our land.
That's
These
right.
are our resources.
I
Wealth
agree
is
with
here
that.
for getting it.
I don't understand why we give away a couple $100 billion a year to oil companies when the oil is underneath our land.
It's corruption.
The land I would not be against nationalizing the oil companies, but you wouldn't. And then you invest that money back into America. Okay, I'm with you on that.
Sure you do.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, wait.
Unreal.
So we want to nationalize the oil companies. Gee, who's done that before?
Venezuela?
Venezuela, who in the matter of 30 years went from like one of the richest, fastest growing countries in the Western Hemisphere to having money that is completely worthless, that just litters the streets because they nationalized the oil first.
And
that was the first thing they did. Then they gave away healthcare and they gave away education, and then they ran out of money and everything fell to crap. And as far as Russia and their 13% tax rate, that's great. 13% tax rate would be awesome. But that's not why Russia gets away with a 13% tax rate. The reason Russia gets away with a 13% tax rate is because they don't fund everything in the freaking world. It's the spending side of things that is out of control in this country.
Our interest on our debt is out of control. Like 80% of tax dollars are going to interest right now.
Yeah, it is now the single largest line item in the federal budget. And I use the word budget loosely because they haven't actually created a federal budget in almost 30 years. They just keep passing these continuing resolutions where let's just keep spending.
Yeah, it sure is something. These guys, man, these are dangerous people. And I think a lot of times, like, especially the online crowd, look at these people and just kind of laugh. Oh, they're idiots. You know, this guy Destiny. Oh, they like to. These are very dangerous people, you know, and there's a lot of people in this country that want something like this to happen, you know. Luckily, like, I don't think that these people are very scary. You know, I'm not very scared of blue hairs on campus. When I was a kid, blue hairs was a term used for old people driving too slow.
Yeah.
now it's the fucking college kids, right? It's something.
Yeah. Anybody who wants this stuff has never done a lick of history.
Yeah. And it's amazing to me, like, again, Jimmy, he'll have these people on. Like, I would never have that guy on my show if I could not properly, like, rebuke the things that he's saying, which I couldn't do properly. Like, I wouldn't do it justice. I would feel like, okay, if I can't, like, put this guy in his place with actual facts and actual laws and actual history, I'm just not going to have him on because I don't want to have some commie fucking run all over me, you know?
Right.
And he does this all the time, which really makes me mad. You got hundreds of thousands of people watching you, and you're interviewing people on subjects that you know literally nothing about. You know, I remember he was talking to some guy about Bitcoin who didn't know anything about Bitcoin. It's like, you're going to bring some guy onto your show who doesn't know about Bitcoin. You don't know anything about Bitcoin. You're going to talk about Bitcoin. They go, so the halving, does that mean half of my Bitcoin goes away? And he goes, yeah, I think that means half of your Bitcoin goes, but the price doubles. And it's like, that is so not even near reality. Like, how could you put that out to so many people? And they just continue to do it. That's leftism for you. They just don't really care if they've got it. I think a lot of these people in their mind all the time are like, yeah, nailed it.
Well, I just decided to look up the American Communist Party on X, and they have managed, they just created their account last month, July 2024. They've got 32.7 thousand followers.
Yeah, they're dangerous, man. These are dangerous people.
Yeah, and I've got like 170. No,
That's good. I mean, look though, but like you said, this is not. I don't think it's a joke. Like, I love laughing at these idiots and everything, but like, I don't think this actual movement is a joke. I think that it's something that, like, we should take seriously, and we can laugh at them and call them idiots and point out where they're retards all we want, but like, to think that, well, it's just some little, I think that would be overlooking a very seriously dangerous situation that's brewing in this country. If we just went to socialism right now, if we elected a socialist president, not much would change in this country, right? Like we would get Medicare for all maybe, but essentially like we're already there.
Yeah, the economy would crash.
Oh, for sure. But the economy's going to crash anyways. Like I think the economy's going to crash if Trump gets in. He's going to lower interest rates immediately and just kind of prolong the situation. He might be able to limp us along for 4 years. That'd be great. And I'll take another 4 years of prosperity. But at some point, this bubble's got to burst.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. All right, let's go.
Generally speaking, I mean, we support things like debt cancellation, total debt cancellation, not just healthcare debt or college debt, total debt cancellation of all privately held debt for American workers and the American people. We support the things that you mentioned, nationalizing these big industries, but it's not just about nationalization. These are the sorts of things that AOC talked about. She obviously didn't fight for. Bernie Sanders talked about, but he didn't fight for. If you don't have the rapid industrialization of your economy, then you're left with really nothing. I mean, what is it that Bernie Sanders is championing? What is it that AOC is championing?
Nothing.
No fundamental changes. You have to not just have an economy that prioritizes the public good and the public need. You also need what China is doing right now, what Russia is doing right now, this rapid industrialization of your economy.
So now China,
all sectors.
So my thought in this, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, you can build all the factories you want. You can't force these blue hairs to go in there and work. To me, this is just a solution for more immigration.
Right. All right. So total debt cancellation. Okay, so let's pretend for a minute that I am a little tiny landlord and, over my couple of years on this earth, I've managed to buy a house or two and I rent them out. So what do I get when you take that away? This guy owes me 3 months rent. You're just going to wipe it out and I get nothing. See, this is, it's stupid talking points like that. They assume that every business out there is a giant corporation that can just absorb these costs.
Yeah. Money means nothing to these people.
The majority of landlords in this country are people that own fewer than 10 properties.
Mm-hmm. Me. I'm a landlord. Yeah. I rent out rooms in my property, my single property, What am I supposed to do in something like that?
And rapid industrialization, honestly, if you want rapid industrialization in this country and you want to do it constitutionally in a liberty-focused manner, get rid of about 90% of our federal government.
Yeah.
There are 18 powers granted to Congress in the U.S. Constitution. 18. Article 1, Section 8, look them up. How do we have 440 federal departments and agencies if there are only 18 powers granted to Congress? We've allowed our federal government to become so bloated and so ginormous that it eats everything. I mean, it's the reason we don't have businesses growing in this country anymore. Because, I think when Trump cut the corporate income tax down to like 25%, and Biden wants to raise it back up to 37 or whatever. I don't remember the exact numbers. Who pays that? Well, the big evil corporations pay it.
Always them.
Yeah, the big evil corporations pay it. You mean they won't just add that to the cost of the good or service that you and I, the consumer, are going to buy?
They don't get it.
Yeah. Milton Friedman said in a congressional hearing once, the sad truth is only consumers pay taxes. So when you add a 25% or 40% or whatever you want income tax on a corporation, they're just going to pass that along to consumers. And then when you think about how business works and you have a manufacturer who is buying raw materials, well, the company that supplies the raw materials, well, they've got to pay that corporate income tax. Mm-hmm. So it's added into the cost of the goods. And then they sell those materials to a manufacturer who has to pay that corporate income tax. So they add that into the cost of the goods. And then they sell that to a distributor who has to pay corporate income tax, which adds to the cost of the good. You're talking about, an item that really only costs like $1 to make and ends up charging us, you and I, the consumer, $12, $13 because of the multiple layers of corporate income tax that have been and profit, of course, all being added in there. Getting rid of the 25 or 30% corporate income tax, it's not going to lower prices across the board 25 or 30%. It's going to lower prices across the board 60, 70%, because there's multiple layers of that tax in everything you buy. You want rapid reindustrialization? Get the government out of the way.
And we're seeing this backfire in California right now. They had to have their $20 minimum wage, right?
Right.
We got to have our $20 minimum wage, but now we've got $25 cheeseburgers and we're freaking out and we don't know why. So let's blame the government again. Well, I don't know how they fix that one. Yeah.
Well, McDonald's can afford
inflating.
it. McDonald's can afford to
Of course
that
they
cost
can.
of labor.
Of course they can. And all they're going to do is just automate their employees out of the job at this point.
Well,
where they're looking at $20 minimum wage. It's like, all right, that burger flipper doesn't look so expensive anymore.
Yeah, but McDonald's, the corporation, might be able to afford that, but not all McDonald's are owned by
No, they're
McDonald's
franchises. Yeah.
A large majority of them are franchised, and most of the people own 1 or 2 restaurants. They can't afford that.
It's a joke.
This is what happens when you get people in government who have never run a business.
Oh, Tim Walz. Tim Walz has never had a real job in his entire life. He went from the military to a school teacher, which I don't consider a real job. Maybe some people do, to government.
Well, look at Biden.
Biden was he's a creature of government. You're right.
He was elected to the Senate the year I was born.
That's unbelievable. My God, you've had to deal with that asshole your entire life, and he's still not gone. Well, maybe he's dead. Who really knows? All right, continuing.
Also, one of the things from my upbringing is that I equate communism with authoritarianism, and
for a
that
good
the
reason.
Government just dictates, and just like how what Jordan Peterson ran into, where they wanted to dictate with his speech, and they're doing the same thing in the United States. They're trying to do that. We have hate speech laws and things like that. So, do you equate communism with authoritarianism or with freedom?
Unbelievable.
Well, I think it's you have to look at what you're talking about when we say freedom, because in America you have freedom to align directly with the state, you have freedom to do degenerate things online, and you have freedom to screw over the working class of the country, and you won't have any sort of legal repercussions. You have freedom to be friends with Jeffrey Epstein and go to his private island and diddle around with a bunch of underage girls. But you look at communist states, the laws are actually implemented and upheld. You have the freedom to live a prosperous life. And when it comes to America in particular, we have a rich tradition and history of respecting the basic freedoms that we know and uphold that our founding fathers laid out. So anything that ever comes about in America, and this is the American Communist Party, we'll have to respect those traditions, and we'll have to respect those laws that we already have on the books regarding those basic freedoms, because that's what makes us America.
Respect for laws. Respect laws in this country. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. First off, communism cannot coexist with the United States Constitution. It just can't happen. No. Number 2, he talked about the freedom. Communism is real freedom. Sure. Okay. Decide you don't want to go to work one day.
Yeah.
To your government-owned factory. Then what happens? See, here in this country, you have the freedom to say, screw you, I quit. And you don't have that freedom in a communist country. I said that when I was in the military. One of the biggest things I miss and have missed since the day I got out of the Navy is knowing that when I went to work, every person around me was going to do their job. Because in the military, if you don't do your job, you don't just get fired. you could get put in the brig and, you know, you're thrown in jail and fed bread and water for 30 days, and while they take half of your pay.
Yeah, you're a slave.
And then maybe they'll let you go back to work. Maybe they just kick you out. But everybody went to work. That's communism.
That's a great analogy. I like that a lot because I had some buddies in the military that were a little bit lazy, and they found out the hard way that you are not free while you're in the military.
No, no, you're not. I think actually after his last clip, I think this would be a great place to play Scalia.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Talk about the freedoms and the rule of law within
Let's
communism.
do it. You know, one thing that I wanted to, we didn't get to the clip, but one thing that I wanted to bring up was they brought up gulags in one of these clips. And when you watch the guy's face when he brings up gulags, it just goes into this really big smile where he goes, and he says straight into the, I think we could use a couple gulags in this country. And you know he's telling the truth.
And who else has said that in the last decade or so? Oh, wait, the American progressives that want to put anybody who doesn't think like them in a re-education camp. I mean, Hillary talked about re-education camps after Trump.
Yeah, they did. You know, look at what happened in Australia during the lockdowns. A lot of people. There's a really good dirt bike podcast that I listen. I was a dirt bike racer, so I listened to a lot of like dirt bike podcasts and stuff like that. And one of them is hosted by this Australian, and he said, you know, when I moved to America the first time, I had some very, very heated debates over 2A with people, and I want to publicly come on this show and say I was wrong. I was completely wrong. And I thought that was a great freaking clip. I've got it saved. And those are the wins, right? Where you get a normal person who should believe in 2A to just really see why it exists. All right, here's Scalia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm happy to be back in front of the Judiciary Committee where I started this
Stop it anytime you want.
pilgrimage.
I
am going to get even more fundamental than
Russian Bill of Rights.
My good friend and colleague. Like him, I speak to students, especially law students, but also college students and even high school students, quite frequently about the Constitution, because I feel that we're not teaching it very well. I speak to law students from the best law schools, people presumably especially interested in the law, and I ask them, how many of you have read the Federalist Papers? And well, a lot of hands will go out. No, not just number 48 and the big ones. How many of you have read the Federalist Papers, cover to cover? Never more than about 5%. And that is very sad. I mean, especially if you're interested in the Constitution. Here's a document that says what the framers of it thought they were doing. It's such a profound exposition of political science that it is studied in political science courses in Europe. And yet we have raised a generation of Americans who are not familiar with it. So when I speak to these groups, the first point I make, and I think it's even a little more fundamental than the one that Stephen has just put forward, I ask them, what do you think is the reason that America is such a free country? What is it in our Constitution that makes us what we are? And I guarantee you that the response I will get, and you will get this from almost any American, including the woman that he was talking to at the supermarket, the answer would be freedom of speech, freedom of the press, no unreasonable searches and seizures, no quartering of troops in hope, those marvelous provisions of the Bill of Rights. But then I tell them, if you think that a Bill of Rights is what sets us apart, you're crazy. Every banana republic in the world has a Bill of Rights. Every president for life has a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights of the former evil empire, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, was much better than ours. I mean it literally. It was much better. We guarantee freedom of speech and of the press. Big deal. They guaranteed freedom of the speech, of the press, of street demonstrations and protests, and anyone who is caught trying to suppress criticism of the government will be called to account. Whoa, that is wonderful stuff. Of course.
Just real quick, like what he's talking about is exactly what I was talking about with the mosquito abatement. Sure,
Yeah.
we've got an email. Send us an email and we'll come out to your house. We're never going to read it. We're going to throw it in the trash, and we don't give a shit if you've got a barbecue. Like, we're going to stick to the schedule.
So this is the late great Antonin Scalia, and he was a brilliant mind, and I seriously miss him. But what he was just talking about, that is communism. They wrap it up in all this shiny paper with this, amazing Bill of Rights, but then they don't enforce the Bill of Rights. What is truly unique about the American experiment is the first three words of the U.S. Constitution. We, the people. We are in charge. The Declaration of Independence says that, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Government, American government, its purpose is to protect our rights. That's its purpose in the Declaration of Independence. And then in the Constitution, it carries that a step further, and it says that, okay, we the people do ordain and establish this Constitution. It didn't get made by those guys in Philly that signed the parchment. It was just a piece of paper at that point. It did not become the Constitution until the citizens of all of the states agreed to it. We the people. That's never going to be the case with any other form of government.
Because it's we the government.
Right, because it's always we the government. Government, regardless of what kind it is, democratic government, Republican government, communist, socialist, a monarchist, and it doesn't matter. All government grows. At some point, government becomes a living organism, and like all living organisms, it wants to grow and gain power. It's up to we, the people who ordained and established this government, to restrain that growth. And that's what the Constitution was. It was the document that said, this is what the government is allowed to do. And they're not allowed to do anything that's not in this document.
Yeah. When I went to college, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we stopped paying attention. We let them do whatever they want. And now it's this giant Leviathan, and we can't get it back in that box.
Mm-hmm. And everybody is propagandized into thinking that this is the way it has to be. When I went to college, I got paid to go to college, everybody. I did not pay to go to college. I was paid, so I didn't waste my money on college. Nobody knows what rights are. They don't understand that your rights are granted to you by God or through your humanity, however you want to, think of this external power that grants us these rights. They all think that rights are something that is given to you by the government. Hey, we're going to give you this piece of paper that allows you to hold a gun. No. You are allowed to defend yourself through God, through your humanity. Like all of these laws, none of them really exist. They only exist in one place, the human mind. And it's up to us to really put it to work or not. That being said, like you've got a new project out, Framers Constitution, right? I went Founders Constitution. Very cool project. Tell us about it a bit.
Okay, so this project was actually going to be a book. Initially, I decided I wanted, I think a big part of the problem in our world today is that we don't know what the Constitution says, and we don't know what the Constitution meant. Mm-hmm. There's only two legitimate ways to interpret an old document, be it the Constitution or Shakespeare. There's only two legitimate ways to interpret it: the way that the author meant it, or the way that it would have been understood at the time by the people of the time. We don't look at our Constitution in either of those two methods anymore. So I created this tool, the Founders Constitution, and it started as a book, and it was going to be a leviathan of a book with a giant bibliography
Yeah.
and tons of appendixes and footnotes, and it was going to be one of those things that nobody would ever read.
Mhm.
So I decided to turn it into an interactive web page. So it's on my website, liberty-lighthouse.com. If you do liberty-lighthouse.com/constitution, or just click the word Constitution when you get there. It is the original text of the U.S. Constitution before any of the amendments, the very
Cool.
first version of the Constitution. And all throughout the whole thing, which is like 4,500 words, all throughout the whole thing, there's phrases that are underlined and clauses that are underlined. And when you click that clause or phrase, it'll open up a little pop-up window. And in that pop-up window, it'll have my explanation of what that clause or phrase means. But I don't want anybody to ever take my word about any of the things that I say. I want you to learn for yourself. So underneath my explanation is where I got that explanation. So for example, if you go there and let's see here, I'll do it right now. You go to the Founders Constitution and you click on let's say the general welfare clause that is in the preamble. Hey, can I share my screen?
Let me try. Let's do it.
I think I sure can.
Oh, cool. Perfect. Double click.
All right. So
Oh, yeah, you can. Awesome.
so if you go, here's the Founders Constitution, here's the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, increase domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare. Well, general welfare is one of those phrases that is constantly abused by government. So what did our founders mean? You click it, and here's a little pop-up window that says, promote the general welfare. This phrase means that the government should work to support the well-being of all of its citizens. It does not grant unlimited power, but is intended to provide for the common good through specific enumerated powers. Now, where did I get that explanation?
James
Well,
Madison.
here's Federalist number 41. If you click on that, it will go over and open up in a different tab, Federalist paper number 41 on the Library of Congress website.
Wow.
So that you're not even, it's not even my words. You're not taking
Yeah.
my interpretation of it. This is straight from the Library of Congress's website.
Wow, that's so freaking cool. I actually have like questions like this a lot. I got into an argument with ChatGPT a couple weeks ago about what the framers would have thought about barring felons from owning weapons, and it gives you a bunch of bullshit. Oh, they probably thought this and that. And it's like, okay, so when was that law instituted? In the 70s? Okay, so it wasn't talked about for 200 years. Do we really think they thought that way? Super cool, man, to be able to do that. You know what I was thinking about when I was first looking through this is like, here in the next couple months, you might be able to make yourself like an AI fucking Thomas Jefferson. How great would that be to just have like an AI version of Thomas Jefferson that you could ask questions to?
That would be pretty freaking awesome.
I think it's close. I think we're close.
So anyway, this is my latest tool, and I'm really proud of it. You'll see you see there's lots of things underlined, lots and lots of footnotes. I'm not a computer programmer. I've never written computer code in my life, and this is like 2,000 lines of code.
It looks nice, dude. It looks clean. I like it. Like I screwed around with it a little bit. I clicked and went to a couple different places, and I haven't really like sat down and gone through it like hardcore, but super cool. Like it works clean. It works great on my iPad. Like the click through and everything works good. You did a great job on it.
There's a lot of trial and error.
I'm
But
sure.
yeah, I put a lot of time and effort into it. It's probably the thing I'm most proud of, the Founders Constitution. I hope to turn it into an app really soon.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
I still have a few more sources in there that I have to link to original documents, and a few more little tweaks here and there. Once I get that done, I'm going to work on putting it into an app. But creating an app costs money.
Yeah, For sure.
I can do a web app, but what's really the point of a web app? Just go to the website.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a native app for Apple and or Android, well, they both Apple and Android cost money to put anything in their app stores.
Yeah. I think this app is worth $5.99, no problem, personally, but that's going to be up to you. While we're before we get out of here, capitalism a lot of time gets a bad rap for, these greedy capitalists. Well, the greedy capitalists aren't the ones who set the prices most of the time. It's the sellers. The seller sets the price.
Exactly.
You can ask whatever you want for a product. It's on the seller to pay it.
Right. When I was teaching classes at Walt Disney World, I used to teach restaurant related classes at Disney World. I would talk to my restaurant managers we had a menu engineering class, and part of menu engineering is pricing and profitability and where to put things on the page, but also the backside of it of like, do you really want to sell a whole lot of these? You don't make any money on them. My question was always, what is the proper price for selling anything? And so we're like, what's the proper price for selling a cup of coffee? I mean, let's be honest, a cup of coffee costs what?
Cents.
25, 50 cents to make. What's the proper price for selling it? The answer is whatever people are willing to pay. And that's not greed. That's common sense.
Yeah. That's the way things should be.
Right.
Right on.
Because if you're charging if yours is $5 and most people think that $5 is a little too expensive, but it's really good. Now, I'll suck it up and pay the $5. Sooner or later, somebody's going to come around and they're going to make one that's just as good and they're going to sell it for $4.
Yep. No, when I worked on Pier 39, my job every day, my first part of my job was to stop at the first bar on the end of the pier and ask what a pint of PBR was. Because we were going to sell it cheaper. Whatever your price is, you're going $5.50 today. We're heading for $3.25, and that's sometimes what you got to do to make business.
Well, a lot of people, wait, before you go,
no, I can stay as long as you want. I was just trying to get you out of here.
I appreciate it. And I do have to go spend some time with my wife, but unions are constantly taking credit for the 40-hour work week. You know who created the 40-hour work week? Henry Ford.
Yeah.
When other companies started coming out and, now there's Chevrolet and there's Oldsmobile and Mercedes-Benz and all of these other companies are starting to sell cars. And Henry Ford started having a hard time manning his assembly lines. He created the 40-hour work week to draw employees from other companies. That wasn't a union thing. That was capitalism. Henry Ford, another great example, he was famous for saying, you can have a Ford in any color you want as long as it's black. You know why? You know why his first cars were black?
No, I don't.
Because he did the research and found out that black paint dried in half the time of any other color. So he used black paint so he could produce more cars faster.
Guy was smart.
But when other car companies started offering color options and started taking business away from Henry Ford, he started offering color options. Competition
breeds innovation.
Is how you lower prices. Competition breeds innovation. Competition makes everybody's life better. There is no competition in communism. There is no competition once the government controls anything. And with that,
what a great episode, man. I'm so glad we did this. This was awesome. Thanks again for coming on, Peter. We'll talk again here at some point.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Follow me on Substack, libertylighthouse.substack.com, and check out the Founders Constitution at liberty-lighthouse.com.
Excellent. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.